Kathy, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. You're Brandon? No,
I'm Brandon, yeah.
you're Brandon. Hi. Oh, woo. How are
Hello.
you? Sorry about that difficulty. I'm not real
Yeah,
good on the computer, so I might have 30 Zooms open. I don't know. As long as we
that's,
can see and talk, that's great.
that's it, exactly that. That's what's important.
Thank
First of
you
all,
for
thank
inviting
you.
me. I appreciate it very much that you want to speak with me. Thank you.
Of course, thank you for coming on. It's an amazing story, and I think more people need to hear about it. So what I'm going to do, let's go right to the beginning when it started. So let's go back to January 1978. Walk us through what happened that night.
January 1978 was a weird month beginning in January. The day before the attack on January 14th, I had been having the greatest month, the greatest couple of weeks. It was happy. I was in the sorority house. Um, it was a happy time for me. On Saturday the 14th, I went to a wedding. I had a church that I was a member of, and a couple was getting married. I remember it was really cold in Tallahassee that morning. And I got up and I got dressed in my corduroy pants and my sweater. And the wedding was at noon, and then the reception was going to be outside in the yard. So when I went to walk down to the church, it was so cold and so overcast. And I was just saying, oh, God, just, what a terrible day for an outside reception. So we had the wedding at noon in the chapel, and we went outside for the reception, and it was beautiful out. It was still cold, but the sun was shining, and it was just a wonderful day for a reception. So I stayed there a couple hours, and I had friends there, other students, and we talked about going out that night. So this is later on Saturday the 14th, and I said, well, let me go home and change back to the sorority house, and I will change, and then I'll meet you and we'll go out. So I walked down the street to the sorority, and I opened the front door, which opened to a beautiful foyer, and there were girls, sisters, talking. There must have been like 7 or 8 of them just talking about what they did that day and what they were going to do that night. And, I chimed in and said about the wedding. And then I said, well, I'm going to go upstairs and get dressed. So right next to the foyer was a beautiful wooden staircase. So I went up the stairs. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. And I walked into our bedroom, which faced the back of the sorority house. We were on the 2nd floor. Our windows shades were always open. There was a bank of windows at the back of the room. They were always open to let the sunshine in because we had plants hanging on the curtain rods. So when you walked into our room, parallel on each side of the room was our closet, and then right next to that was our dresser. Next to that were our desks, and then next to that was the footboard to my twin bed. My headboard faced against the back wall, leaned against it. Between our beds, Karen and I, our beds are duplicates on each side of the room. We had a small trunk, used to be called a footlocker, and it was about 3 feet by 4 feet. And it was just a little trunk we put things in. And the room was rather small. So from the bed to the trunk was maybe 3 feet on each side from my bed and the other bed. So that night I decided to stay home and not go out. I wanted to study for a test I was going to have. So I stayed home, went and had dinner downstairs in the cafeteria area of the sorority, went upstairs, put on my yellow flannel nightgown, my white socks, and curled up into the blankets to sit down and study. It was about 11:30 or so. I decided to go ahead and go to bed for the night. My roommate also was in the bed studying, so she agreed, and we turned off the lights. About 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard our door slide open, and the door opened up on our carpet, which was a yucky gold, but it was kind of nice, but the color was bad. And I heard the door open and slam against the closet, which was right next to it. And I kind of woke up a little bit. I'm a heavy sleeper. And I woke up a little bit because of this noise. And then I heard a louder noise. The trunk between our beds was hit and stumbled, and it made a louder noise because whomever was in our room couldn't see the trunk, but he stumbled over it. Now I'm waking up more, and I'm focusing my eyes, and I'm looking up, and I see a black shadow, a silhouette of someone standing next to me. And I'm squinting, and all I can see is this black shadow, this black image. And as I'm looking and squinting, excuse me, I see him raise his hand up over his head and brought it down on my face with such force that it broke my jaw in 3 places. I almost bit my tongue off. My cheek was open from the corner of my mouth up to my ear. It was just flapped open. I had several lacerations on my shoulder when he hit me, and I passed out immediately. And hearing this noise, my roommate, Karen, on the other side of the room, which only was like 6 feet from my bed, woke up and heard the same noise and me screaming out. So she put her hand up to her face, and this person went and hit her with, as we know now, a log, a piece of firewood that he had picked up on his way into the sorority. I now woke up a bit, and he heard I was stirring, and he came over, and he was going to hit me again. And now I'm scrunched into this little ball to make myself as small as possible so that when he hit me again, maybe it wouldn't hurt so bad. The first time he hit me, it was like a thud. It was just like you bam your hand. It didn't hurt. It just was pressure. And now that he was coming back to my side of the bed, I knew it was going to hurt. And my face felt like knives and needles and everything going through it. And I'm crunched in my ball, and his arm is raised up. And all of a sudden, our black, dark room lit up with a light. And it was really illuminated and bright. And he saw that light, and now I could, in my little ball of cringing, I could see him more. And he was antsy. He was like moving around real fast. All of a sudden, he turned around and ran out our bedroom door. This light was the car light from a sorority sister that was being brought home that night. The lights from the driver shone up into our room in the parking lot, and that's what exposed him. And he thought I'd seen him, or whomever was in the light had seen him, and that's why he ran away. The car moved, and the lights went out, and the room was dark again. And I'm still in my little ball, cringing and screaming for help at the top of my lungs. Help me, help me. And all I was doing was making gurgling sounds because there was so much blood in my mouth and my jaw was hanging and the lacerations. I wasn't making any noise but gurgling. At this point, my roommate woke up and walked out the front door to our bedroom, and other sorority sisters saw her in the hallway and turned her around and just walked her back into our room and turned on the light. And that's when they saw that I also was bloodied because they saw Karen was. And immediately they called 911 for the police to come.
Absolutely astonishing the story. Now I know that you kind of, after what happened, I've read that you kind of in a way obsessed with him. You wanted to understand why he would do such a thing, and I think that's amazing the way you just, you know, you wanted to figure out why he did this and who he was. You've watched all the documentaries, you've watched all the, you've read all the books. What made you want to understand this guy who did all this vile stuff to you and your friends?
When I was attacked that night, this was a blob, a shadow, an image I couldn't make out. And I didn't want to live my life afraid of shadows. And I didn't want to be afraid of anything and live in a box. So once I was, my injuries were recuperating and I was stronger, I did decide once they knew that it was Ted Bundy, which took about a month before they caught him and knew that it was him that attacked us, I wanted to put a face to this shadow, to this monster. And I wanted to know about him because he was flesh and blood, and he had I don't say feelings, but he had a family, he had a life. And I needed to know this because obviously I met the monster, the horrible, evil thing he was. But I needed to know both sides because that way I healed myself in knowing this was a man, this was a person. And I studied him because I knew he wasn't going to come back at me. And I could put a face and I could put it behind me now because I wasn't going to be afraid of anything of a shadow. And I wasn't afraid of him anymore once I put a human face and life to him.
You say that it took over roughly a month to find out who it was. Where was you, or how did you find out eventually who it was? I know you said it took a month roughly, but where was you and what was your day like when you found out it was Ted Bundy?
When I left the hospital in Tallahassee, I was flown back to Miami, which is where we lived. My injuries were so bad. I had my mouth jaw wired and closed in 3 places, and my jawbone was so shattered they had to wrap wire around it so that when it did heal, it would be in alignment. So I was in Miami recuperating, and there was so much coverage on the news and everything. My parents didn't want me to go through that and hear anything. They just wanted me to focus on being well. I remember I watched a lot of soap operas during that time because no news. And when I read the newspaper, I had all these articles cut out of it because once again, my parents were trying to save me that angst I was going through. So when they did catch him about a month later, they took him back to Tallahassee. He was caught in Pensacola, leaving the state. They took him back to Tallahassee and put him in jail. And when the sheriff, Ken Casares, talked with the sheriff and police over on the West Coast, they did put it together and they realized it was Ted Bundy who had attacked us. And when they told me that, I was like, Ted Bundy who? You know, at first I was like, I was a sophomore in college. I was having fun and going to toga parties and everything. You know, this person wasn't at all in my head, or I don't know anyone on campus. You know, it was so safe there and happy. So when they did tell us it was Bundy, I had to look and see who Bundy was, and that's when I started the process of knowing what I could about him. So when they did tell me, it didn't mean anything because at that point I didn't know who he was.
Oh, and of course, what I wanted to ask you as well was how you felt on the day, either it was announced or on the day of his execution. Do you feel that was justified? I know that might sound like a silly question, but a lot of people believe he either should have just stayed in prison for his life, or some people do believe he should have died a more horrible way. So it's just, you know, it might sound silly, but a lot of people do have their different opinions on his execution. I just wanted to get your thought on that.
Okay. Before he was executed, of course, we had the trial in Miami, and I actually had to testify against him. So I was taken to the courthouse the morning of my to testify. I was taken this little conference room where I saw the paramedics and the police and everyone that had taken care of me the night of the attack. So I had to go in and testify. I went into the courtroom and I sat at the witness box, and I looked around and I saw Bundy sitting there. He was at the defense table, and he looked at me and I stared at him. I wasn't afraid. I felt like I have power now. I'm looking down at you. And I don't remember what questions the prosecution or the defense asked me. They wanted to know about that night. And I remember one question that the defense asked me, and that was, is this the man you saw in your room that night that attacked you? And with all my heart, I wanted to say yes, because I wanted to help convict him and put him away. But because I never saw his face, I had to say, I don't know. And that hurt me so bad, because he had done so much evil and hurt so many women that I couldn't be part of the conviction. However, he was convicted, and he was sentenced to death, which I don't know that anything, even death, was hard enough on him. I just wanted him to hurt as many times as he hurt all the women, and myself included. He was actually on death row for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
He received several stays of execution, which is when a judge is approached by the defense and says, can we have more time before we kill him, because we want to try to defend him more. We want to do more appeals. So over the 10 years, he was given 4 appeals and lasted and was allowed to live that long. The day of the execution came, and my husband and I were sitting alone in my living room. It was a small room, and the district attorney for the state of Florida called and said, he's not getting any more stays. He's going to be executed. And this was at midnight, so my husband and I knew. We stayed up all night, and at 7 in the morning, we got the call from the district attorney that said that he was killed and that he had been executed. And I sat there and cried. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Take your time. Honestly, take your time.
I sat on the sofa. My husband had his arms around me, and I cried and I wailed. Excuse me. And I wasn't thinking of myself, but the whole time I was thinking of all the girls that he took away from us and their families so soon. They were so young. They all had lives and dreams. And then I thought of Margaret and Lisa, the 2 sorority sisters that had been killed the night before he attacked us. And I hurt for them, because they never got stays. They never got another 10 years to live. And I hurt and I cried for their families. And then I composed myself. My husband was still holding me, and I wiped my nose and my face. And I said to Scott, I'm hungry. Let's go to breakfast. Because that was it. He was gone.
Yeah.
And life was going to continue going on. So we went out and had breakfast after that.
When you first met your husband, when you first met Scott, and you told him this story, how did he react? Did he believe it? How was?
Well, Scott and I had known each other from high school. We were in theater together. So I knew him for 4 years. He was just like, just one of the gang, and we always hung out together. When high school, when we graduated, I went to FSU, and he went to a college in South Florida. We both got married to the wrong people. We got divorced, and it was about 6 years later, I saw Scott in a bar. So I got his number, and I called him up, and I said, hey, come on over for lunch one day. And he did, and he never left. We were like, we knew each other so well, and it was such a good feeling and so right for us to be together. So when we did talk about the incident, the whole thing, the attack, he did not know much about it, because he had been in South Florida at school, and then he went to Jacksonville University, and he wasn't thinking about that kind of stuff. He was partying and studying and partying. So his life did not wrap and think about that. So yes, when we first got together, I told him a little bit of it. I have a scar on my face, and he questioned that. And as I told him a little bit, I did not go into the whole story. It wasn't necessary. Just let him know, because my parents were into it and everybody was really, involved in it. And so I told him, and he was like shocked. he was like, oh my God, I can't imagine that really happened to you. So we've been married 31 years now, and he is so kind and so protective of me. Just different times he'll just like, we'll be someplace and he'll wrap his arm around me because he can tell something's freaking me out or something. And so he's been great. And now, of course, he knows the whole story, and you know, he just feels terrible for it, and he knows there's nothing he can do but to love on me and make me feel secure.
Now, now, from a young age, obviously, you diagnosed with lupus, and then the horrific incident that happened with Ted Bundy, and then you were diagnosed with breast cancer. What keeps you so motivated and driven to wake up every day and just kick back everything that life is throwing at you?
When I was 5, my daddy died, and it was my brother, my mother, and I. And the new normal now is going to be without daddy. And I have memories of him, and then I have memories of him not being with us anymore. So that kind of let me know that life changes a bit from, you know, being a happy family to not having daddy. When I was 13 is when I was diagnosed with lupus, systemic lupus, which is a form that attacks your organ as well as your immune system. So I was sick. I lost all my hair. I was given experimental chemo. It was, my parents were told I would probably not live my 7th grade through that year because they really back then didn't know what was wrong with me. Lupus was not a well-known disease, and if it was mainly older women. So because it was not diagnosed, they were trying experimental chemo and anything they could think of to help keep me alive. So 7th grade, I stayed home from school. I was homebound. I had a teacher that came in and gave me my studies. And my parents worked in Miami. And I remember I would get so lonely during the day. I'd pick up the phone and dial 0 so I could talk to the operator just because I was so bored. And I was so sick though, with no hair, and I'd look outside and all the kids were playing, and I just couldn't even think of doing that. Toward the end of the year, toward the end of my 7th grade, I finally talked Mom and Daddy to let me go out one time at least. And I knew if I said church, they would like, okay, great. So I got all dressed up. The first time in a year I'd been out, went to church, my hair all wrapped in a scarf. Afterwards, we went and got ice cream. And not a week and a half later, I came down with shingles. So now I have shingles all over my face. And I knew this wasn't going to be my new normal. I knew I had to get out of this because I did not want to live like this. This was not going to define me. So that again was something I overcame because I was determined to do it. After the attack, I didn't want to, like I said, stay in a box and be afraid. And my parents and family had been through so much with me and lupus. I wanted to get better for them as well. I didn't want them to have to go through the pain and trying to take care of me and everything. That was important to me, to get strong for me, but also for them. And so as things happen to me, I want to be strong for myself. I want to keep going, but I have a lot of people behind me that I want not to push me, but to be around me. And so that's one motivation I've had over the years. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was 32, and it was a stage 2 breast cancer. I had a radical mastectomy, and part of my treatment was I was going to have chemo. I said, oh God, no, not chemo again, because the first one was so hard, and I lost all my hair. And they said, well, you'll have 9 months of chemo, which are 9 episodes. So my first one, I sat in the clinic and had my chemo, and I said, okay, I have 1 more to go after that one was done. And Scott's like, no, you have 8 more to go. I'm like, no, I have 1 more, because I can get through 1 more. But if I'm thinking I have 8 more to go through, I can't do that. I just can't. I'm not strong enough for that. So each one I had I had one more to go. And that seemed to help me move on with things and not be just terrified of the next 6 or 7 chemos I was going to have. And every time Scott picked me up and took me to the clinic, we'd go out to lunch and he'd do all these sweet things and we'd play board games. One time it was my birthday that I had a chemo. He picked me up and I had a wrist massage, and it was wonderful. And I got to the clinic and on my chair were flowers and balloons, and he made it the best day he could for my chemo. And he's just been wonderful like that and always done great things for me that I can look back on and enjoy after all that being on. So I went through my 9 months of chemo. I lost my hair, but I came out of that because I had a son now, and I didn't want to be lying in bed with no hair and him seeing me like that. So we bought a wig, and I went to his football games and his baseball games, and I always didn't have the strength to do it, but I did because I was doing it for him.
That's really amazing. Of course, now 2020, it's been over 40 years since Ted Bundy done anything. In your opinion, is it a good thing that it's still spoke about over 40 years later?
I would say so, because Bundy was a serial killer, and you can't have a serial killer unless you have his victims. And there were so many victims. Like I said, they were so young and just looking forward to so much. And when we talk about Bundy now, 40 years later, it brings recognition again to those women that he killed. And over the years, I've wanted so much to contact their families and just say, just give them love. And I don't know what I would say. But then I thought, it's been 40 years for me. But if I were to go to them and they saw me and we talked about their daughter, it would have been like yesterday that it happened to them. And I just didn't think for me to feel good for going there outweighed the pain that I would bring back to them. So I never went to see them. But now they are naming the names of the victims. And now, over all these years, they have a face and a name and a life.
Yeah.
So, 40 years later, we're talking about him, but by doing so, we're also bringing in the victims also.
Yeah. And of course, your story is just so amazing and everything you've been through. And I know you have told it before on many different platforms. Do you get quite a lot of people talk to you about their own situations that might be similar?
Yes, I do. I'm on Twitter and Facebook, and I get so many wonderful emails and thoughts of love. And I'm kind of not embarrassed, but this is just my little life and how I've lived it. And people just think I could never do that. I could never go through that. And yeah, they can. People can go through more than they think. And one of the things I did when I was scared and weak, I looked deep inside of me, deep in my soul, and I found that strength. And I pulled it up and I used it to depend on, because that was my strength, that no one was going to take it away from me. And I leaned on it, and it helped over the years for things I've been through. And I explained how I did this and how it has helped me. So when women say, I can't do this, I'm like, yeah, you can. Take baby steps to do it, but you can do this.
Mm.
And then I get so many people that say how I've inspired them. And that humbles me so much, because to do that is wonderful to me. But again, it's just my little life and how I've lived it. But for people to see positive things out of that just makes me feel good.
Just before I ask my last question, I just want to say you are the strongest physically and mentally woman I've ever spoke to, and it's been an absolute honor. I'm so glad that you gave us the opportunity to come and talk to you and share your story.
Thank you.
My question to you is, obviously, I think it was last year, the Ted Bundy biopic came out with Zac Efron. What were your thoughts on that? Do you think it was a realistic portrayal? And do you also think the reason Ted was so dangerous is because he was a handsome man, and he was charming, and he wanted the public to see him one way compared to what he actually was. But what did you think of the portrayal in the film?
At first, a lot of people said, "Oh, how could Zach do that? You know, how could he play that part?" And it's like, yeah, he's playing a part. He's getting paid for it. It's a movie, so he's going to play it to the best of his ability. And he studied Bundy, and he knew. I understand a lot more about him than he wanted to know. That it really it affected him a bit to crawl into the mind and the body of Bundy. And I thought it was very well written. It was the story of the girlfriend's point of view, which there has been so many movies and so many documentaries on Bundy. You know that part. But I thought it was so interesting to see it from her point of view and how she went through it. And to me, that was interesting. And I enjoyed seeing that part. And yes, he was very manipulative. He would let even her see only the side he wanted to see, the good boy, the Republican, working at the voting and being a law student, which he never completed or even really went to class, because it was a fake facade he was showing. And he couldn't follow through with that and live his life because it wasn't him. What he could do well, though, was the other side, the black side of him that killed and tortured and maimed, and I can't even, I'm sorry, I get so upset. The evil within him, and the way that was portrayed was very good, I think. It showed a lot of how he did hurt and kill his victims, and yeah, he was a cute guy to some extent. He had the brown eyes and the face, and that's how he really got his victims, because he was good looking. And I guess we think of a serial killer as someone with horns and, you know, just ugly and horrible. Face of Bundy, it's just so different. And I think that's another reason why people are so interested in him still, because how could that have been the person that killed so much? So I think the movie was well done, and at the end it listed the credits with all the victims' names. Yeah. So you know, somehow the victims were mentioned, and if they could have made the movie 4 hours longer, I would have loved to see the victims up close and personal, and given them more attention.
Yeah. Talking on, you know, the whole thing with Ted, etc. How with the film as well, for example, the film that we just spoke about, I thought it was also well written. I thought it did show a very good, like, as you said, perspective of the girlfriend, and then in court days especially, it would show a lot of a thing that is spoken about a lot, whether it's the film or the story, is Ted Bundy did have a child. What is your feelings kind of towards that story?
That was a very unusual story, as we know. His girlfriend thought that she was in love with him, and that he loved her. She didn't realize that he was using her as far as getting messages out and talking to people, and, you know, of course I'll send that message, dear. So as I said, he was very manipulative, and he just did the same to Carol. And it was very creative, I think, the way they actually got together and married, as they did in the courtroom. What actually made it legal. And then, of course, husband and wife can spend time together. And when this baby girl was born, it hurt in my soul. It hurt. I'm sure it hurt so many people that a baby girl is going to be entwined with this monster. And over the years, I didn't want to know about her. I didn't want to keep up. I just couldn't. The angst I felt for her, I just didn't want to live it with. And as much as I wanted to know everything about Bundy and everything of what has happened to me, I didn't want to follow her story.
Yeah.
So I know she's okay. I know she's fine. So in the end, that's what's important.
Well, your story is absolutely amazing. I can't thank you enough for giving us your time and speaking with us. It's just amazing. You are as Brandon said, you are seriously the strongest woman we have ever spoke to. It's like you don't just go through one thing. You, as you have named, you've gone through many things where the majority of people would give up, and it's amazing talking to you. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for inviting me, y'all. I'm very happy to speak with you and tell you my story.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Hope you have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.